Welcome to the Strength for the Day podcast, which is a daily Bible study with Dennis Fountain. We hope this time together will be challenging, sharpening, uplifting, encouraging, and strengthening to your Christian walk. Thank you for joining us, and we pray you are helped through today's study. Welcome back to Strength for the Day as we jump into another study in the book of 1 Timothy. And today we are picking up in 1 Timothy chapter 1. We're going to read verse 18 down through verse number 20. And here's what we need to remember just to help us kind of again understand the context. Paul, of course, who was a persecutor of Christianity. He did not believe in Jesus at first. His name was Saul of Tarsus. And he was a great persecutor of the early church and, of course, of early Christianity. And Paul would then be reached. You can go read about it, Acts chapter number 9, that the Lord would appear to him on the Damascus Road, and Paul would believe in Jesus, repent of his life, of his sin of denial, and he would receive Jesus into his own life. And then Paul would be a great proponent for the gospel, and he would preach Jesus, and along his journey, he would come across the path of a young man by the name of Timothy. I personally believe that Paul led Timothy to the Lord and was a key instrument in discipling Timothy or helping Timothy grow in the Lord. And then Timothy would advance out and begin pastoring. He would pastor the church at Ephesus. And so this letter, 1 Timothy, Paul is writing to Timothy. It would be about 30 years after the death of Jesus Christ, and Paul writes to Timothy and says, Timothy, I want to challenge you or charge you to help the believers at Ephesus not get caught up in the do's and don'ts of philosophy and religion and the new studies, the Judaizers and Gnosticism and asceticism and idolatry. Help them focus on the glorious gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and recognize that once they know Christ, the best thing for them to do, and for you and I who love Jesus, the best thing for us to do is to love the Lord each day, to desire to walk with Him with a good conscience between us and Him, and have a faith that follows Him. And Paul says, and I'm not just, we learned this yesterday or in last episode, I'm not just writing this to you because of some desire for some pie in the sky type idea. This is something I have lived, Paul said. I was the chiefest of sinners. I was one that did not deserve God to be gracious, and yet God saved me. And I think one of the reasons is to prove to everybody that God can save anybody, because He saved me, who was a nobody that deserved hell. And so Paul writes to Timothy and just says, because of all this, verse 17, God deserves the glory. His grace really works. He really is interested in a relationship with you. And so, Timothy, I charge you to keep this before the believers at Ephesus. And then Paul says these words, this charge or challenge I commit to you, my son Timothy, according to the prophecies previously made concerning you. I'm challenging you this so that by them, by the prophecies, the challenges I've given to you before, that you may wage a good warfare. The word wage means to fight. The word good here, it means excellence. The word warfare, it means spiritual battle. So, Timothy, I'm writing these things to you so that you can fight an excellent spiritual battle, having faith and a good conscience, which some, having rejected concerning the faith, have suffered shipwreck, of whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, who I delivered to Satan that they may learn not to blaspheme. Here's Paul writing, and I think there's actually some sadness in these verses. Paul writes and says that these two, Hymenaeus and Alexander, they have gone a different direction. They believed the lies. They believed other things. Now, these two people, I personally think, Hymenaeus and Alexander, they are those, he says, they had the faith, but they swerved from it. They swayed from it. And so I've just, instead of trying to pursue them and say, hey, come back, guys, I've just said, all right, all right, Lord, here you are. And he says, I've delivered them over to Satan. That doesn't mean that he's like, all right, Satan, take advantage of them. No, he's just saying, here's my hands. I'm hands off. I'm saying, okay, if I could, my cup is them. All right, I've pursued them, but I'm hands off. So if the devil's going to have his way with them, I want them to know I love you and this isn't the direction, but you're choosing it for yourself. But I want us to focus for just a minute on what he says to Timothy, because he challenges Timothy to fight an excellent spiritual warfare. And then he says, having a faith and a good conscience, which others have rejected. Concerning the faith, they have suffered shipwreck. When he talks about fighting an excellent warfare or spiritual warfare, what we need to realize is there is a lot more to this life than what we see. Paul wrote it this way to the believers at Ephesus in Ephesians. He said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood or physical things, but we wrestle against spiritual things, principalities and powers and spiritual darkness, evil darkness and wickedness in high places. And what is all of that? That's a spiritual warfare that is going on all around us. We spoke about this, I believe, a week and a half ago or so when we were looking at the life of Saul in Samuel, different Saul than Saul of Tarsus, who is Paul. And we just were challenged in understanding that there is a spiritual warfare going on each and every day. And while you and I get caught up in our day in and our day out business, going to work and seeing people at the coffee shop and pumping gas and getting groceries and picking the kids up and going to sporting events and going to church and going to Bible studies and watching podcasts and going to the gym and going out to eat. And, we just kind of go through life. We fail to remember that the old song says all around us a war is going on. It's a spiritual warfare between God and his angels versus the devil and his demons. And of course, God has allowed the devil to be the prince and the power of the air of this world, the culture and all of that around us. But God is still working and striving and fighting daily to draw people to him. But the devil battles against that by distracting people. And I think that the devil does a great job of distracting many believers. I think Hymenaeus and Alexander are two that they got distracted with things that weren't foundation to the faith, things that weren't good doctrine, things that weren't what they should have been focusing on. And so it caused them to, the analogy is suffer shipwreck, that they've gone off course and they're not really being used for what they could be used. They're not valuable. Now they are valuable to the Lord, but they're not living up to their value. They're living below their potential with God and in God. And I think all too often in our culture that a lot of Christians do that. We fall like Alexander and Hymenaeus. We give in to silly thinking and ideology and our culture and what's going on around us. And we forget that there is a spiritual warfare going on. And if I'm a follower of Jesus, may I every day allow the Lord to help me to pursue him in faith. Paul said that you may wage a good warfare by having faith and a good conscience, by recognizing that there is more to all of this than what meets the eye. And every day the spiritual warfare is going on around me. So God, help me to be in tune with you so that I don't miss opportunities to witness. I don't miss opportunities to glorify God, that I don't miss opportunities to say no to sin and to deny my selfishness. No, every day, may we realize and recognize that there is a bigger picture. There's a war going on around us. And if we would commit these things to our trust, like Paul said, I'm committing these things to you, Timothy, so that you could fight an excellent spiritual warfare. Well, what are these things? Remember, going back to chapter 1, verse number 6, or verse number 5, the purpose of this commandment is to love from a pure heart, from a good conscience, and from sincere faith. To love God from a pure heart, just a genuine real love for him, to love God so much that I want to walk with him, the clear conscience, and to love God so much that I follow him every day by faith. Those things will help me war a good spiritual warfare. Why? Because I don't get caught up in the here and now. No, I realize that God is worth following. God is worth living for, and God is someone that I will love each and every day. So as I make my decisions through the day, as I follow him through the day, it's going to be based upon that attribute of my love for him. And because of that, I'm going to be conscious of the people around me and conscious of the environment, what's going on, conscious to pray, conscious to seek the Lord, conscious to ask God for his help and his direction in my decisions and in my conversation, and being that Christian who's in tune, they're realizing there's a spiritual warfare taking place around me. So God, help me not to get distracted by all the ins and outs of this life, but Lord, help me today to realize that I am just a small piece in the big picture, but God, you deserve all the glory in this. The first chapter, I think, in our devotion time, our Strength for the Days, can be a little repetitive, but I really hope that it drives home this thought that you and I are called to live a life that loves God, that walks with God, and that by faith chooses to follow God. May we do that today, realizing that there's a spiritual warfare taking place all around us. And so, Lord, help me to be one that leans into your team and not one that leads into getting distracted from what truly matters. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow as we pick up in chapter